Our leading lady for this movie is the bar owner Maria, voiced by Yuko Sasaki. The ending theme this time is He's Gone, which in full has half the song in Japanese, half in English. It also gets a fair bit of diegetic use throughout the movie, as the English part can be heard playing in Maria's bar, usually at Lupin's request. The gang are back on separate paths, with Jigen engaged in a test to be hired as a mercenary for a certain group. Goemon is in training at a Buddhist temple. He's given the instruction to seek out an item that Zantetsuken can't cut, in order to further his ability. Fujiko's latest cozy up is an arms dealer called Marcez, who's been asked to deploy a battalion to a certain location. Aiding him is the battle-hungry Crazy Mash. Last but not least, Lupin is discussing a certain story about Ernest Hemingway, which speculates that Hemingway had one more novel in the making before he killed himself, or as the story goes, was murdered, that was based on a treasure he'd recently discovered. The pages were stolen and stored in an impenetrable box, the key to which is currently in the possession of a German noble. Lupin moves out to steal the key, but all he finds is the noble already killed by Mash for it. He and Mash spot each other, so Mash turns around to destroy the castle outright. Lupin drives out the window and knocks their wing, incapacitating them for now. His next target is the box's last known location, a banana republic known as Kaka. It's been deemed a no-landing zone, but that's never stopped Lupin from finding his target. Immediately upon landing, he's surrounded by soldiers working for the current president, Carlos. Their leader, Lopez, orders a search and finds his Walther, suspecting he's working for Carlos's enemy, Consano. Lupin tells them it's nothing more than a novelty camera, as well as a novelty lighter. As he leaves, he draws his real Walther as a precaution. Escaping to a highway, Lupin blocks the path for a woman named Maria. He hitches a ride with her, and she covers for him when Carlos's men question her. Maria brings Lupin to her bar, located in an otherwise abandoned town, but tells him to leave as soon as possible. Lupin decides to scope things out and spots Jigen among a group of Consano's men. Signalling Jigen over, he asks what's going on, though Jigen doesn't give up much beyond it being personal. Consano arrives at the presidential palace, and gives Carlos a demonstration of Jigen's abilities. Carlos warns Consano that he has his own ace, however, in the form of Goemon. Lupin watches as the pair square off, clearly not pleased at being on opposing sides. They decide to hold off on a real match in favour of a slap fight for now. Meanwhile, Zenigata is in trouble with the ITPO. Turns out you can't just claim expenses on tracking Lupin by spending money on cabarets and $4,000 taxi fares in order to track him down. As he wanders around, he spots Fujiko in a car and jumps aboard. They arrive at a Swiss bank, home to Marcez's personal vault. Containing gold and numerous priceless artworks, he stores the key there. He then tries and fails proposing to Fujiko as they board his personal plane to Kaka. The gang meet up at Maria's bar. They refuse to help Lupin with the treasure hunt as they have their own agendas to worry about. They do seem to change their minds when Lupin mentions he saw Mash, Jigen's target, in his travels, as well as the box being the thing that Zantetsuken can't cut. It's short-lived, however, and they go their separate ways for the moment. Lupin thanks Maria for her hospitality, but she's not a hotel and says he can sleep in the barn if he really needs a place to crash. Carlos spies on Consano, learning that Marcez is supplying him, as well as Mash being among their ranks. Mash spots their surveillance and shoots it out before having a brief exchange with Jigen. Maria sets off on her own armed with a rifle. Lupin helps himself to breakfast and spots Maria's spare ammo on the table. Maria reaches Consano's fortress, getting him in her sights as he converses with Marcez. She doesn't account for patrols, and they don't buy her claims that she's just hunting birds. They pin her down despite her attempt to fight and escape, but Lupin comes to the rescue on a white horse. Subtle. Marcez is willing to offer his forces for free, on the condition that he can get access to Carlos's collection. The gang have another meeting at Maria's bar, with Jigen mentioning that he might not survive his encounter with Mash. As he leaves, he passes on that the box is somewhere in the presidential palace. Zenigata, who'd stowed away in the boot of Marcez's car, finally pries his way out and goes on a hunt for food. A returning Jigen challenges Mash directly, but Mash ambushes him. Jigen has a smoke and flashes back to an incident they worked on together in Alaska. Mash betrayed their entire unit and killed everyone, seemingly for little more than a bigger share of the payment. A disguised Lupin arrives to aid Jigen. Mash isn't entirely unprepared and counters with a boot dagger, though it's futile on his part. A feasting Zenigata overhears Fujiko as she rebuffs a soldier. He knocks the soldier out and interrogates her about Lupin. She doesn't know anything and calls for more soldiers to scare him off. Lupin helps Jigen have a fair duel with Mash, but fair's not a word in Mash's dictionary. Lupin escapes, but Jigen's taken captive. Goemon searches for the box, discovering a stack of framed letters. He cuts through and finds a passage behind. Lupin joins him and they discover the box among Carlos's collection. Goemon breaks through, eager to cut the box open, but triggers the alarm. Zantetsuken doesn't work on the box either. Lupin escapes back to Maria's bar, but Cansano's men invade, having learned she's a member of a group known as the Scorpions. She indicates Lupin to turn off the jukebox, giving him the instruction of pressing Z3 twice. This triggers an explosion and allows the pair to escape. Maria takes Lupin to a cave with a weapons cache. She explains that the Scorpions, no affiliation to you-know-who, were led by her brother, but he and most of the others were killed by Carlos and Cansano. The two were once partners, just two of many people searching for the Hemingway treasure. They were able to amass power and ended up turning on each other, while Lupin realises they likely haven't found the treasure yet. Jigen is locked up for his fight with Mash, with Zenigata as a cellmate. Lupin encounters Fujiko on his way to retrieve the box. Overhearing Carlos ponder Goemon's fate, Lupin decides to just swipe the box and run. The next stop is Geneva for the key, so Lupin sets up a Marcez disguise. Fujiko has a transparent layer on her negligee that's absorbed Marcez's fingerprints so they can access the vault. They take the key with little incident. At least until Mash and Marcez attack in a helicopter, as the latter doesn't like resignations. As Fujiko drives, Lupin snaps photos of the pages in the box. Mash launches a harpoon at the car and heads down. They hand over the box, but Mash lies to Marcez when Fujiko says she's willing to return to him. As a result, they're dropped in the water. Marcez has less luck with Cansano in reaching an agreement, so decides to just hold him up. Mash turns on Marcez, however, claiming their contract is over. Lupin returns to Maria, only to learn that things have heated up thanks to Cansano acquiring the papers. Fujiko gets the wrong idea about Maria, and Lupin gets caught up in a stray explosion while trying to explain. He wakes up and learns that Carlos and Cansano are set to debate the terms for splitting the Hemingway treasure. When they reach a stalemate, they decide on a duel between their respective aces. Realising the implication, Lupin heads off, with Maria and Fujiko offering aid. Jigen and Goemon are set against each other. Goemon's got the advantage, as Jigen was only granted a single bullet. Jigen loses his footing, so Goemon cuts their support and swings them below. They're pinned down by gunfire, but Lupin comes to the rescue. Back at the hideout, Lupin provides the photos he took of the Hemingway papers. The treasure is located in a deep cave, and for some reason Hemingway's travelling companion died 4 days after finding it. Zenigata's annoyed at missing second breakfast and busts out the cell. He learns from a soldier that Carlos and Cansano have buried the hatchet for now to seek out the treasure. The gang also watch and make their move, though Maria warns that the location is an area known as the Valley of Death. As they follow the troop, a rainstorm sets in. The troops alerted to the gang's presence and attack. The gang counter thanks to some of Maria's weapon cache. Carlos and Cansano also open fire with their tank rounds. The force of the battle has the side effect of opening a hole in the rocks. The rainwater ends up flooding the valley and sweeps the entire troop away. The gang press forward, only to find a dead end. Fujiko inspects the wall and discovers it's lead, man-made even. An inscription from Hemingway warns them away, but they throw caution to the wind and prompt Goemon to open it. Behind the wall is the grave of Hemingway's partner as well as a trove of glowing rocks. Lupin warns not to touch them, as his watch's Geiger counter is going haywire. The rocks are pure uranium-238, explaining the partner's death and the lead wall. Mash is waiting outside with a few survivors from the troop. Jigen finally settles the score, though Mash manages to make it to the grave before collapsing. Lupin has one last drink at Maria's bar, assuring her they'll meet again if any more treasure brings him to Kaka. He rejoins the others as Goemon continues to struggle against cutting the box. He finally succeeds with little more than a frustrated light tap as he's on the verge of giving up. Zenigata also stows aboard the gang's plane as Maria plays us out on the jukebox. The second TV movie also serves as a solid entry in the franchise. Certainly not the first story of the gang getting caught up in a rebellion, but Carlos and Cansano give us a good set of antagonists. The angle of former comrades turning on each other out of greed only to come together again is an interesting take. Granted, chances are if they survived, they probably would have killed each other anyway if the uranium or mash didn't do them in. On that note, like the last movie's use of Lupin versus technology, we have another staple of Lupin III. Namely, if something has potential to be nuclear fuel, it's probably nuclear fuel. Also noteworthy is the antagonist's comeuppance being another Series 3 reference in the form of them being drowned in a valley, though admittedly the method is different from when it happened to Reptile. I also like that they actually do use the key to access the papers, with Goemon's attempts to cut the box being more of a secondary factor. One criticism is that Zenigata doesn't really do much here, spending most of his time trapped somewhere. Granted, it was pretty funny seeing him just break out of the cell for the horrific crime of not being fed enough at least, and it also shows at least some of his ability even if he's not consciously putting it to use. Marcez serves his role well enough, though maybe killed a bit too early, as seeing a bit more interaction with Carlos as well as Cansano could have been nice. As for Maria, she's a pretty good character in herself. She manages to hold her own against the enemy, and proves useful in helping find the treasure despite her cynicism about all of it. It is nice that she warms up to Lupin enough that they're able to part on good terms too. Next time, a race across Spain and France as Lupin aims to steal Napoleon's dictionary. Until then.